Ever see something that just didn't look quite right? Leo Gomez has, and instead of shrugging it off, he took it on. After serving on as many as 12 nonprofit boards at once, he's still looking for ways to serve his community and his neighbors. Welcome to Bearcast. I'm Randy Langford, and this is Bearcast, a weekly interview with business, political, education, and nonprofit leaders. We're examining the relationships between all four and how each one benefits from the success of the other three. After stints with the Spurs, Toyota, and both the San Antonio and Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, Leo Gomez is now the president and CEO of the Brooks Development Authority and Brooks Gives Back. Leo was named a Southside Legend by the South San Antonio Chamber of Commerce in 2017 and received the San Antonio Business Journal's C-Suite Award in 2018. In 2019, he earned Texas Power Broker recognition from the San Antonio Express News. He earned his Bachelor's of Political Science and Business Administration from UT Pan American and his Master's in Public Affairs at the University of Texas. Leo, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Look forward to the conversation.
So you've been with some of the most recognizable organizations in San Antonio, the Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Toyota, the Spurs. What was it about the redevelopment of Brooks that attracted you?
Actually, it's what I dreamed of doing ever since I was back in school. I figured early on in my career that the best way for me to do that really was going to be through the Chamber of Commerce business, uh, which I don't regret at all, and I'm really glad I did. And to this day, I'm a big advocate of chambers of commerce. But to be able to do it in this hands-on capacity, with resources, with assets, to build on the purpose that you really strive for. Randy, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that really needed some help. And there's neighborhoods like that all across the country. And so my purpose, my vision, my goal in getting educated was to be able to change communities like that someday. And lo and behold, I got the opportunity and I'm doing it right here at Brooks.
Good for you. Good mission. That's a good mission.
Yeah.
I explained a little bit about your background in your intro, but there's a lot to cover. So I'd like to go into your involvement into the community. Right now, in addition to being the CEO of Brooks, you're also the CEO of Brooks Gives Back. What's that?
Correct. Correct. That's the nonprofit arm, if you will, of the Brooks Development Authority. Okay? And it originally was created to have an organization that could apply to the grants and other opportunities for funding of projects on Brooks itself for the benefit of Brooks, the
Okay.
campus. Okay? Imagine an art piece literally on the Brooks campus. Okay? And I use that as a simple example. Well, it's been reconstituted. Its purpose now is to build a spirit of philanthropy among the community that we're building and among the employers that we're recruiting to support the very nonprofit initiatives serving the children and the seniors of the neighborhoods that surround the Brooks redevelopment.
Okay. All right. So it's a community based or a community initiative.
Well, it's intended to support the community
Right.
versus literal Brooks assets,
Right.
and particularly the children and the seniors in the very neighborhoods that surround Brooks.
Okay. Aren't you on a couple of other nonprofit boards as well?
Oh yes, I've been on numerous nonprofit boards, and that kind of service is just very important to me. I've found myself sometimes being on as many as 12 boards at a time,
Oh my gosh.
and I've been very blessed to have employers who support me in doing that. So I don't kid myself, and not everybody can do that. But I do challenge those people that I love and that are looking for fulfillment. That if I can serve on 12 boards, you can serve on at least one.
Right. Right.
Right?
Where does that desire to give back to the community come from? Is that something you've had since you were a kid?
Yeah. Again, I was a nerd of a kid. I really was, uh, and it bothered me before I was even a teenager. It bothered me to see what I didn't see in my neighborhood, what I didn't see in the neighborhoods of my friends versus other neighborhoods, and somehow or other I managed to not, you know, uh, be envious of the other neighborhoods or have bad feelings toward other areas that were being successful. I sincerely asked myself, why? Why is it like this here? And what can we do to change it?
Yeah.
And that's driven me all my life, Randy.
If they can do it there, why can't we do it here?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate help, but I don't need a handout.
Right. You're obviously very comfortable in a leadership role. Have you always been that way, ready to take the lead? You talked about when you were a kid.
Well, I'll tell you, I was a nerd of a kid, but I was the oldest in the family. And my parents, love them, God bless them, but they got divorced very early in my life. And I may have been only 7 years old, but I thought I was now the man of the house, and took that responsibility very seriously, helping my mom and looking out for my younger brother and my younger sister. I think that's where it started. But then the geek that I was and the student that I was in ROTC in high school, and the ROTC commander and instructor there took a kid that seemed to have great grades and really invested in him and helped him understand what he could do if he actually led with the kind of thinking that he had and the striving for good grades. And I ended up being the battalion commander of our OTC unit in high school, as much of a nerd and introvert as I was. And I was not someone that could speak to crowds at a moment's notice. I can do that now. I thrive on it, but it took 30 years to get to that point, Randy.
Well, yeah, it's the overnight success that took 30 years, right?
Yeah. Right.
The nonprofit work that you do is very close to my heart. There are so many nonprofits doing so much vital work in and around San Antonio that nobody even knows about. Nobody even knows the organization exists, much less the work that it's doing. And that was a big part of why BexarFest was designed the way it is. We could have had students making videos about their school or their band or their football team, but we wanted them to learn how nonprofits operate at the same time. I'd be interested in your thoughts about getting young people involved in the nonprofit community and how that molds them into members of society.
Well, I love those kinds of conversations, and I would encourage students to ask themselves a basic question or two. What are the things that don't seem right to you? What are the things that bother you? What are the things that, you wish you could change? And then go do some research. Are there nonprofits that address those things? That's the beginning of it. And there are plenty of paths on it. You don't need to be the CEO. You don't even need to be the board member. You can be a volunteer that helps a nonprofit like that. But it starts with those questions for me, for anybody. And all of us have those things that we thrive on and we're happy about, and those things that just don't seem right. And so that's where I'd ask folks to start with.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the supporting the students and the seniors in the neighborhood and those organizations. That shows an interest in making the area more than just a place to work or live. It could easily just be a place to work or a place to live. You've made it a community. Why is that important? Why does that need to happen?
Our vision in a nutshell is to create regional prosperity. So at Brooks, we have a 1,308 acre campus that used to be a military base, about 100 years, right? But our job here is not just to redevelop the former base of 1,308 acres, but to redevelop it in a way that creates prosperity beyond our boundaries. Okay? Why is that so important to us? We're in Southeast San Antonio. Brooks itself is a zip code, 78235, like most military bases. They have their own zip code. And we are completely surrounded by 78223. The poverty level in 78223 prior to COVID was in excess of 20%.
Wow.
Okay? I'll be damned. Can I say that here?
Sure.
I'll be damned if 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, we've developed this awesome 1,300 acres of a mixed use community, but the surrounding zip code is no better off. Right? And so That's why that's so important. It's not, yes, we want to bring jobs, but we want to bring the right kinds of jobs, the kinds of jobs that are going to help employ the folks and families in our surrounding neighborhoods. That's how we're going to have an impact in those neighborhoods. It does us no good if we create a lot of jobs, a lot of good jobs, and everybody gets those jobs, but the very people in the surrounding area.
Right.
And so that's where that comes from, Randy.
Well, you mentioned looking at other neighborhoods and instead of being resentful, using that as an incentive. Why not my neighborhood? Why isn't my neighborhood like that? And you certainly wouldn't want to be in the position where you're creating that Brooks prosperity and the people around you are resentful. Like, what's going on here? Why isn't this impacting us? Why aren't we benefiting from this?
Right.
That's
And Randy, one of the first things I did when I came on board as a CEO, 7.5 years ago, was symbolic, but I thought it was very important. It's something I actually learned from the Spurs and from the chairman of the board at the time, Peter Holt, the dad. And let me tell you, the Air Force had pretty much left already, okay? And we still had the 1,308 acres surrounded by chain link fence. We still had the guard shacks up, and there were no military missions here. Right. Now, with all due respect to those that were leading before I came on board, I just didn't feel that delivered the right message to the surrounding neighborhoods. Plus, Randy, I built my very first home right on the other side of the fence, south of the base, right? When it was an active base. And so I know what it was like to live next to the base, what we had access to and what we didn't have access to, right? And so in my first 30 days on the job, I asked our staff, take down the fences and take down the guard shacks. And there were some very concerned folks with what that would mean to security, the potential for vandalism, et cetera. I'm like, no, if we respect the neighborhoods will respect us. And Randy, we've had one incidence of vandalism that I would chalk up as true vandalism as a result. And I had the opportunity to visit with the kiddos and the friends of the kiddos that did that. And they now look out for our campus. And, I think, I really believe, I have heard it from neighborhood leaders and residents that signaled something different. And now the parks that we've built, the hiking trails that we have here, the apartments that we have here are open and available and belong not just to the people on the 1,308 acres, but to the neighborhoods that surround Brooks.
Right. They're a member of the neighborhood, a part of the neighborhood.
And I love hearing them say, we have a park that's just as good as one on the north side.
Nice.
And absolutely. I say, you bet, it's your park.
You bet, absolutely. And that modeling behavior that you're talking about, where you would take down the fences in the guard shack, we respect you, you respect us, we all get along. Right. I take that down a notch to the personal level. I personally believe every adult is a role model for kids, whether you want to be or not. They're watching everything we do. And coming back to embedding high school students in nonprofit organizations, even there on the South Side, these kids are in these organizations working on their productions for months. So they see adults working in these cultures of empathy and compassion and working for more than a paycheck and working for a cause larger than themselves. How does that impact young people, putting them in that position where they see adults behaving in that way, that this is what we want you to do?
It gives real meaning to purpose. And when young adults see adults acting with purpose, and the purpose is different than profit. Nothing wrong with profit, and nothing wrong with trying to earn a better paycheck.
Sure.
But when you can aim your efforts at something that is of purpose and fulfilling to you, and the kiddos see that, then they see it as a bona fide route to consider. But if all they hear adults talking about is the paycheck, profit, and business, then the adults are doing a disservice to them, because they're not conveying why they're pursuing the profit, why they're pursuing the business. The message is one of the end game or the end result is strictly the profit. And there's people who think that way, and that, all power to them. But for those of us that need something more fulfilling, the more we do it and practice it, our young students, even 6-year-olds, they know when we're for real and when we're not. And so the more that those students see people that are for real and pursuing something fulfilling, the more real that path looks to them. And they understand that it's not just about pursuing a paycheck or a bigger savings account. You need to do those things, but that's not the ultimate purpose.
What does that do to the community when the kids are taught that lesson at 16, 17, 18 years old, when they're the leaders, 10 years from now, when they're running the show? What does that do to the community? You talk a lot about how the Brooks impacts the community and the community impacts Brooks. It seems like those kids, when they take up their leadership positions, it's a whole new ballgame.
I think there's nothing more beautiful than communities changing from within. And when the students or the people in their very neighborhood become involved in the nonprofit initiatives in their own communities, and the change comes from within, that's real change.
That's in the bone.
I said earlier, I appreciate help, but I don't need a handout.
Right.
Well, this is the way to do it. The way to do it is to get involved, make the allies, get the help, but we don't need to be begging for subsidies. We don't need to be begging for handouts or the kinds of things that just prolong the condition that our communities are in.
Right. Absolutely. I'm with you 100%, Leo. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you so much. I appreciate you making time for me. I appreciate all your insights. I appreciate what you're doing, not only on Brooks, but around Brooks. Good for you.
Well, thank you for preaching nonprofit initiatives and nonprofit involvement and such. Thank you for doing that in all sincerity. And to all those that heard today, I hope I did something that rang true with you today and that it inspires something.